this didn't come out until after we were married. But he did have a fiery temper. Well, I'd never met anyone with such a fiery temper before. One time he picked me up by the breasts and threw me down the corridor. As a result of that, I was all bruised. And that was just one of many incidents recorded on the doctor's records.
Castrie's behaviour drove Beverly to have a brief affair of her own, and she fell pregnant by her lover. In September 1975, she gave birth to a son, but a minor complication saw her and the baby readmitted to hospital on October the 3rd, just 2 days before Leslie Molseed's disappearance.
It's probable that Ronald Castrie was angry at the birth of his first son that he knew not to be his. He was only 21. His wife was back in hospital and kept in there, so he was home alone. He therefore had the opportunity and maybe a motive.
But at the time, the police weren't examining the opportunities and motives of others. They were focused solely on Stefan Kiszko, whose trial for Leslie Molseed's murder began on July the 7th, 1976.
The first time I actually saw Stefan Kiszko was at the murder trial in 76. And I can remember looking down on him and thinking, God, he's so tall, he was so big. How could he have done that to my sister?
Kiszko now vehemently denied any involvement in the murder, but his lawyers knew it was going to be hard to undo the damage done by his initial confession. As a result, they decided to run two alternative defence arguments. The first was that their client hadn't committed the murder. The second was that if he had done, it was due to mental illness brought on by the testosterone injections he'd been receiving.
As I understand it, the specialist who had actually prescribed those drugs was available to the defence, and he'd made it clear to them that that was arrant nonsense.
But this was ignored in the defence claim of diminished responsibility, which to the jury may have appeared as effectively an admission of guilt.
It seems to me that once the defence were pushing that to the forefront of the mind of the jury, then the jury, like the public, would think that they'd got the right man.
2 weeks later, the jury at Leeds Crown Court rejected both defence arguments and returned a verdict of guilty. Stefan Kiszko was sentenced to life in prison.
Stefan was already being escorted back down the stairs. The court was in an uproar.
In my eyes, this was the person that had killed my Lil, my sister Lil, and that's where he should be, in prison, and I never wanted him to get out.
It's something you just can't put into words. You're numb, because you keep coming back to the fact that Lil's never coming home. And he, Stefan, was the last face that she'd seen, and all these things were going through your mind.
Kiszko was taken to Armley Prison in Leeds to begin his life sentence as a convicted child murderer.
He went through horrendous experiences inside prison in terms of bullying other inmates. And of course, the one thing they always said to him was, the only way that you'll ever get parole is if you confess to this murder. And that you did in 1975, and Kiszko would never ever admit to it.
He was physically and verbally abused, and abused in all sorts of unpleasant ways. And the effect of those experiences were to make him ill, and gradually he became more and more mentally ill.
In May 1978, Kiszko's appeal was rejected. Isolated in prison for his own protection, he now faced the prospect of a life behind bars. But his mother Charlotte refused to give up hope and waged a one-woman campaign to prove her son was innocent.
This was one determined little lady. She was going to have a day when her son would walk out of jail. No matter how long it took, she would, you know, fight and fight and fight.
British justice, we always say, is the best, and it lets you so down.
She was passionately determined to find somebody who would prove her son's innocence.
Charlotte Kiszko contacted anyone she believed could possibly help her cause, including Mrs. Thatcher and the Queen. She finally found a sympathetic ear in solicitor Campbell Malone.
The more that I looked at the case, And the more that I spoke to other people who had also looked at the case, the more I just developed the feeling that there was something terribly wrong.
There was one man, though, who knew for certain that Kiszko was innocent, but he remained silent. By the mid-1980s, Ronald Castry and his wife Beverly had 3 children, but the appearance of conventional family life disguised a catalogue of abuse.
I'd describe my dad as being split personality. He'd be all right to everybody outside, but to us it'd be psychological violence towards me, physical violence towards my mum.
He had to tread around on eggshells all the time, and he did have guns for a certain amount of time. And by this time he drank an awful lot.
He'd down a bottle of whiskey a night, and then mixed with painkillers as well. It was like a time bomb waiting to go off.
He was totally weird in the bedroom department. He had washing lines, canes, box of tricks, you know.
He always had a keen interest in schoolgirls, and he wanted my mum to dress up in schoolgirls' uniforms, and because my mum wasn't that way inclined, he'd openly say in front of us kids, well, I'll go out and find someone to do it. So that would lead him to prostitution.
Castry was a regular user of prostitutes over the years, but there was a much darker side to his sexual fantasies, which had disturbing echoes of his previous conviction.
The family holidays were taken at the same place. We went there for a number of years. We didn't realise why in the beginning. It was only as the boys got older we all realised together that he was taking an interest in the young girls.
He'd send us lads off swimming, and he'd stood there in the pool, main pool, ogling at the girls.
One time we were quite close to another couple and their 2 daughters, and he made them feel so uncomfortable they moved.
You cringe, you're embarrassed, you just want to curl up and die.
Ronald Castry may have been enjoying his freedom, but without his knowledge, events were unfolding that would soon put him in fear. The man doing time for the murder he had committed was about to be declared innocent. When Stefan Kiszko was convicted of Leslie Molseed's murder in 1976, there seemed no doubt that a dangerous killer had been put behind bars. But Kiszko's mother, Charlotte, fought tirelessly to prove his innocence, enlisting the support of solicitor Campbell Malone. His efforts led to West Yorkshire Police re-examining the case in 1991. They uncovered crucial evidence that had been locked away in the archives of the Forensic Science Service for 16 years. And it would cast dramatic new light on the case.
The police came to see us, and they gave us a background as to what the new evidence was, that the world was led to believe was new evidence.
What the police had discovered were notes taken by a forensic scientist at the time of the original inquiry.
What we know now, and what should have been known then, and possibly may have been known then, was that the semen taken from Stefan did not match the semen which was found on the body.
Stefan Kiszko had a condition by which he could never produce sperm heads in his semen. Never. It was always known from the early days of 1975, from the first examinations, that the semen staining on Leslie did contain sperm heads. It would appear that that matter didn't get an airing that it should have done at Leeds Crown Court.
Stefan Kiszko had been cheated out of 16 years of his life. This vital piece of evidence would have proved his innocence beyond doubt, but was not disclosed by police and was never asked for by the defence. The forensic scientist and the surviving senior police officer were later charged with perverting the course of justice, but the case against them was dropped on the grounds that the passage of time made a fair trial impossible.
I think that as an investigation it was at the least incompetent. I fear it may have been something worse. I have no reason to believe that the officers targeted and then pursued somebody they knew to be innocent. I think they'd become convinced by everything they saw about Stefan that they'd got the right man, and they didn't want to know about anything that didn't fit that.
For Stefan Kiszko's 16 years of wrongful imprisonment came to an end on February the 17th, 1992, when the Court of Appeal finally quashed his conviction.
I've never had an emotion like that before or since. And I knew it was coming. It wasn't as though there was any doubt about the verdict. But it had been so long, and there had been so much suffering for Stefan and his family. It was a physical sensation that I was only just able to control.
But the years of incarceration had taken their toll on Kiszko's physical and mental health.
It's been a nightmare situation, to be honest with you. Prison's been very difficult. The whole situation in the police station was a very difficult one, and the whole situation just has been intolerable.
He struggled when he came out. He had a lot of difficulty coping.
I feel angry towards the police, the way they handled all of this.
Why?
Because they should never have arrested me. They should have arrested the right person.
People were extraordinarily nice with him, and the nicer they were, the harder he found it, because it brought it all back.
What are your hopes now for the future?
My hopes for the future are to get married, go on holiday and enjoy my life as much as I can.
It was not to be. On December the 23rd, 1993, 18 months after his release, Stefan Kiszko suffered a heart attack and died. His mother, Charlotte, died 4 months later.
I felt they were cheated. I would have liked them to have had longer together. Before she died, Charlotte said to me that I was to promise not to let people forget Stefan's name or what was done to him. I will always try to keep by that promise.
For the family of Leslie Molseed, Kiszko's release marked the beginning of a new ordeal.
I'd hated this man for so long, and now they're telling me that this man hadn't done it, and there was somebody else out there who had actually killed Lel, and I couldn't accept it.
Even to this day, it's still there. You know, I had 16 years of living where Kiszko killed my daughter, and it's still, everybody, you know, people keep talking about, oh, you want a poor lad and all that. I can't get that.
I'm very upset about Kiszko serving 16 years in prison for the murder he didn't do. There's somewhere out there there's a man who killed my sister, and the police, I hope the girl to catch him, because I'll never arrest him until they do.
None of us will rest.
None of us, in fact, will rest.
It brought it to the forefront of my mind what had happened to Lel, what she'd gone through. So you started all over again. Lel, Lesser Cotton Salts had been murdered again.
I appeal to any person who has any information that could assist the police in any way to come forward. 2 families have been the victims of this murder, mine and Mr. Kiszko. And if anybody can help our anguish over Leslie's murder, please come forward.
A new hunt to find Leslie's killer was now underway.
The first thing you do is clear the ground from under your feet. So you go back to 1975 and you say, well, what evidence, what information did we have at that time? And a number of potential suspects emerged from that data trawl.
Several men were questioned by police, but by the mid-90s the investigation had stalled. Desperate to see the killer brought to justice, Leslie's family took to the streets with their own campaign to remind people of the little girl who had been murdered back in 1975.
People forget at times that that little girl is dead. I mean, she's my little girl, and I think about her day in and day out. This man has got to be brought to justice.
With such a frustrating lack of progress, West Yorkshire Police launched a cold case review under the leadership of Detective Chief Superintendent Max McLean.
We always knew that this was a very sensitive and important case for West Yorkshire Police. We knew that we, amongst others, had got it badly wrong in 1975, and it was something that meant a lot to us. We knew we couldn't put